Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is Ukraine War News Update, first part thereof for the 18th of February 2024. Starting to feel a bit rough now I've got back from Ukraine. It's like, catching up with me. Or it could be that I went to the Wallington Village Hall quiz last night with a couple of mates, and that's why I didn't get any videos out yesterday. Again, always the bridesmaid, never the bride. We came second. It's a massive load of people there, huge quiz. And our collective brain powers, we were stymied at the end, foiled by some other geeks. Ugh, terrible. Anyway, it's a second quiz we're doing, second time we come second. It's all about second. Although the first time, Stuart's Inquiry, we actually won that one. But anyway, that's another story. Right, let's go to the Ukrainian General Staff figures for the Russian losses for the day. Before, all the usual caveats apply. Of course, you can see them in the description to my video below. 1,080 personnel loss, 11 tanks, 53 armoured personnel vehicles is an absolutely insane number. I mean, 1,080 personnel loss is high, 11 tanks is pretty useful, 53 APVs, wow, 40 artillery systems, goodness gracious me, 3 anti-aircraft warfare systems, that's a high number in that category, and then 3 aircraft. These are some very useful figures on the back of 3 days of very high figures of Russian losses. And then 2 vehicles and fuel tanks, weirdly incredibly low, one of the all-time lows in that category, and 7 pieces of special equipment to add to that. So yes, aside from the vehicles and fuel tanks being very low, every other category is incredibly useful for the Ukrainians. Now, Andrew Perpetua hasn't got a loss stats sheet out today. He sometimes the timing is just wrong for me for when I release my videos, and today's one of those days. So we'll go to looking at some evidence of a Russian plane falling from the skies. Why this is important is because the Russians, as soon as the 3 airframes were claimed to be lost yesterday, flooded the information spaces with complete denials of this. Right, yesterday was the highest troll, the day of the highest troll activity on my threads than I can remember. I deleted more trolls, banned more trolls yesterday on my threads than I've ever done. I probably banned, I don't know, somewhere near 20 people from my threads that were just overt trolls, right? And this is all connected to Avdiivka. It's funny where, you know, a Russian landing ship gets sunk, there's complete silence, and then the Russians take Avdiivka, and they're all shouting about it, of course, trying to wrestle back that narrative to give a kind of pro-Russian Yahoo type narrative to what was taking place yesterday. Well, part of that activity yesterday was to deny. It was all about, you know, the positivity of Avdiivka. It was to deny those 3 Russian jets shot down, saying they've all returned safely to home. They've all done this, and you know it's just complete BS. It's just obviously BS. And then when footage comes out of one of those 3 jets literally crashing to the ground, you know that their efforts to deny this are falling on deaf ears, or at least they are with me. The problem is, if they actually find any purchase with anyone out there, that is a worry. Footage allegedly shows one of the Russian Air Force planes going down near the village of Diakove in Luhansk, slightly further north than I would have predicted. And it's interesting, Thomas Tyner says it's again a German-donated Patriot battery. Battery's commander said they love the truck-mounted launchers as it allows them to move up, fire, and be gone when the missiles hit the Russian jets. So far, this American, German, Ukrainian battery has shot down 3 Mi-8 helicopters, 1 Su-24, and 7 Su-34s. Absolutely amazing. 2 Su-35s, 1 A-50, and 1 IL-22M. Now, those last 2 planes were the ones shot down in the Mariupol area and the Black Sea. So this launcher, this German provided launcher, has done a lot of work in and around those front lines, and could be the one that was pulled. Is almost certainly the one that was pulled to the Kherson region, again to the area where they could strike the northern Black Sea and Mariupol area. Here, the eastern front, and then probably the Bryansk area as well. So firing from within Ukraine into the Russian territory of Bryansk to take down those helicopters and whatnot. This is really good news for the Ukrainians. Now, even better news to add to that is that this morning a further jet has been shot down. So Ukraine destroys Russian fighter jet, 12 drones and a guided missile overnight. Russia attacked Ukraine with S-300, 6 S-300 ballistic anti-aircraft guided missiles, 3 Kh-22 cruise missiles and a Kh-59 guided missile, and 14 Shahed type attack drones overnight into the 18th of February. So we'll come to that in a wee while. But it's interesting, Russian channel Romanov denies the claims of a downed Su-34. Everyone is at home. And this is what we see. We see as soon as there are claims of Russian airframes being shot down, they come out and deny it. No report says we'll just wait for the video footage to appear again then. This is what they do. They deny, and then the evidence comes out and they're like, and they start talking about something else. It's just rinse and repeat. Much needed tea break there. Right, now we're going to go and look at some sources concerning the losses in general. Right, the first thing to say is that Ukraine has taken some really heavy losses around Avdiivka. I spoke to Greg yesterday. Greg and Zhenya have contacts within units operating in Avdiivka. It is insanely tough for the Ukrainians. They are losing decent, well-trained troops, well-experienced troops in the area, and they're losing them at rates that are not good for the Ukrainians. But, and I'm not trying to be positive here for the sake of it, for just trying to G myself and you guys up, but the reality is the Russians have lost phenomenal numbers as well. But as I spoke with Greg about, even with really good ratios, really positive ratios, which, even Zelensky's been shouting about, sort of 7-1, and the Russians will overtly deny this. There were lots of people with laughy emojis in my threads laughing about this. But even with those ratios, the real terms numbers of losses for the Ukrainians, has been really very damaging for the Ukrainians. They don't have that. They care more about their troops in a kind of human way. They care more about their troops because they realize how precarious their situation is with a lack of mobilization going on. Each troop is just so valuable, and losing them to the degrees they did in Avdiivka in that operation withdrawal, where they've also probably lost a significant number of POWs, and some decisions that were not made in a timely fashion and could have led to more deaths in Avdiivka than were necessary. So it's been a very difficult couple of days for Ukraine. But when you look at the Russian sources, there's an acceptance that it's been an absolutely horrific week for the Russians as well. And not just there, actually, there's some other attacks. So yesterday, there was a massive attack in Robotyne, and the Russians lost a phenomenal amount of kit again. And we'll come to that in a second. But let's go to Merz, this is a Russian mill blogger, has already posted some interesting stuff yesterday. War Translator says, some painful doom posting from Russian volunteer Merz. He found out the numbers of irreversible losses in Avdiivka, and it's not making him happy. And he really seems to like Syrskyi. Keep in mind that he is risking his ass by voicing this information, so it must be really getting to him. As well worth noting. Let's just go through this. So, Yevgeny, personally, I'm the person who introduced this very term, investment, as in investing losses to achieve greater results later. This is how I've been interpreting Bakhmut and Avdiivka. That is, if the ratios are that favourable, which you could argue they are in Avdiivka, but still those losses for Ukraine is hurt that much, then it makes it worth it. This is in philosophy we call it moral consequentialism. You take a hit for a greater good. Into circulation in March 2023, and as part of the 4th Infantry Motorised Rifle Brigade, very actively participated in ensuring that the counteroffensive was not as successful so far as it was declared by Ukrainians. I'm not laughing now. I feel really, capitals, really bad. You laugh, and exactly what makes me feel so bad over the fact that Syrskyi skillfully pulled out the cauldron in Avdiivka, which was taken for a long time and with difficulty, even that small part of the Ukrainian troops that could still be pinched there. I feel bad about this because a couple of hours ago they told me numbers that I will publish after all. When you start roughly estimating from the text of the published Putin's congratulatory telegram how much this is in the burnt boxes vehicles, 4 tank regiments that distinguished themselves in advancing several kilometres over 4 months, and 1 distinguished tank division, how much is this in dead people? This whole list of distinguished motorised rifle units, which did not even include the St. Petersburg Mobile Regiment 1487, reduced almost to zero to a control company and headquarters, which eventually went into another attack. When the personnel ran out, perhaps it's not so bad. Maybe I'm wrong. But then we already have the numbers. And what he's referring to is Putin has listed a bunch of the units that have successfully taken Avdiivka as a kind of memorial, a commemoration, of those units. So he officially released that. But anyway, Merz here is saying, yeah, that may please some people, but when you look underneath those sort of claims and understand the losses that have been involved in that kind of commemoration, it's not great. So he says since October, from Novelsky to Novoselivska, 16,000 irretrievable losses on our part and about 300 knocked out armoured vehicles. And the enemy, having carried out a defensive battle and suffered, in the best case for us, irretrievable losses of 5,000 to 7,000 during the same time. This is my rough estimate and not some known data. Says goodbye and leaves to new pre-prepared positions. However, that's not even the worst thing, dear Yevgeny. If, as a result of all of this, as well as based on the results of Mariinka, a large criminal case had been opened, it would not have been so bad. The worst thing in this story, the worst sign of future new F-ups, is that a soldier from the destroyed Regiment 1487, when he brings a statement to the St. Petersburg Military Prosecutor's Office, is refused to accept this statement according to the established procedure, popularly explaining that these whom he wants to punish, those... the English is a bit screwed up, who have already been appointed heroes, and you soldiers die in silence. So this is a guy that's really sounding off about the situation, particularly in Avdiivka, but also referencing Mariinka too, and saying, the losses taken to take these places is just unacceptable. However, if his stats are correct, like 16,000 to 5,000 to 7,000, that may be 3 to 1 loss ratio. I often say that the very minimum Ukraine need is a 3 to 1 loss ratio. Ideally, they need a sort of 5 to 1 loss ratio to be able to prevail at the end. So, and if that's the higher end, 7,000 to 16,000, then that's 2 and a bit to 1 loss ratio. So, as bad as it is for the Russians, we must remember it's really troubling for the Ukrainians too. PS01 says, do you want to know how many Russians died in Avdiivka over 4 months? Here's a rough estimate of a bare minimum. There are 26,617 messages in the search group for Russian military personnel who went missing in the Avdiivka area. That is to say, as far as I would understand that, 26,600... but I don't know if there are any repeats. I don't know how good that's... I know nothing about the provenance of this claim. But it could be that there are, at one end of the spectrum, 26,600 people have had people asking about their whereabouts. That doesn't mean they're all dead, but you can see that Avdiivka has been very, very painful for the Russians. Now, the White House National Security spokesperson, Adrienne Watson, called the withdrawal the cost of congressional inaction. Quote, the Ukrainians continue to fight bravely, but urgently need supplies to defend against Russia's onslaught. Like Biden, she calls House Republicans to pass a bill authorizing aid to Ukraine. Of course, Mike Johnson's just gone on a 2-week recess and is refusing to even table that motion. It's absolute... It's a crime. Right, now, this is what I was talking about in the Zaporizhia direction. So they're back to doing what they know best. Russians attempted an assault in Zaporizhia yesterday. They were stopped. 18 destroyed vehicles, 3 of which 3 were tanks, and 70 dead. The Operational Command West did not provide a location, but there were talks about assaults on the Robotyne sector. And yeah, there's lots of footage of that happening. So you can go and check that out. I will list all the links in the description below if you want to go and see evidence for that. And here we have, I guess, I can't really show that. Whoops. Let's try and get to the right place here. Hopefully that's okay. Now, we have Russians claiming the front is starting to collapse from lack of ammo and the Russians are pressing the advantage. Unmitigated disaster, so many dead Ukrainian soldiers in the streets. And they show this is a Russian mill blogger showing a picture of these dead Ukrainians in the streets. What it fails to point out is that those 3 Ukrainian soldiers have their hands either tied in front of their body or behind their backs. And we heard yesterday, in fact, Greg was telling me yesterday that there's evidence that the Russians were shooting Ukrainian wounded soldiers. So the wounded soldiers left behind were just eliminated. And they were also killing POWs as well. So they don't want to take any prisoners. They're just killing everyone, which is, a war crime. And so that's what's been happening in Avdiivka, and that's been widely reported, and indeed is evidence in that picture as well. Right. Another Russian army commander has returned home in a black bag. So Colonel Magomedali Magomedyanov died on the 14th of February in a hospital from, quote, wounds received during the fighting. Dagestan Public Chamber reported he served as deputy commander of the 18th Army during the fighting in Ukraine, the public chamber said. So this is a high-ranking officer who has perished. A number of these have died, obviously, during the war in Ukraine. Now, moving on to distant strikes. Here we have the Air Force tally. This morning, Ukraine shot down a 4th Russian aircraft in around 24 hours. Air Force Commander Mykola Oleschuk confirmed that the Su-34 fighter was downed along with 12 attack drones and a cruise missile. The question is how many things got through. There are some rumours that the Ukraine is having a bit of an oil shortage at the moment. There's that massive oil depot that was taken out in Kharkiv. In fact, the day I left Kharkiv, it struck. The Russians struck there. That killed 7 people, took out a load of houses and whatnot in the area, and there's polluted a river. It's pretty much, there's a massive environmental issue, as well as taking out all of that oil. Now, my guess is that the Russians are every night attacking some of these oil depots in the same way that Ukraine is doing that to Russia. I think Russia realised, probably, seen the tactics of the Ukrainians over the last few months of hitting oil depots, and have said, yeah, that's a good idea, we should do that. And they are doing that to the Ukrainians, and they are probably having quite some success that we don't hear about, right? We don't hear about successful Russian strikes. We hear about, they've taken out 14 out of 20 Shaheeds, or, 27 out of 38 Shaheeds, or whatever it is. And you're thinking, well, what are those other Shaheeds doing? What are they hitting? What are they striking? They're going to be hitting something. And my guess is quite often it's going to be energy infrastructure, not like electricity, although I think there is a couple of these that are taking out thermal power plants and whatnot, but oil facilities that give the Ukrainians fuel to run their army. Now, in terms of striking, I just want to remind viewers of the personal side of this. When we look at pictures on the internet, when I show you things, and when I just talk about places, and I say, Tim White says, let me start with an update from twin cities of Kramatorsk and Sloviansk in Free Donetsk. They were both hit last night. In the former, they're still trying to locate a 3rd body under the rubble. In Sloviansk, they also fear some may be trapped in the ruins of a school. Like, when I was in Ukraine, in Kyiv, in a restaurant, in a very lovely, well-to-do restaurant, where we went out for our last meal before I left, and Pierre was there next to me. And Pierre is a British humanitarian worker. He's a lovely guy. He works in Kramatorsk. In fact, he told me yesterday I'm evacuating people in some other place near Kramatorsk. But he texted me yesterday to say they are hitting Kramatorsk hard. When we were at that table in this well-to-do restaurant in Kyiv, that seemed like a world away from the front lines, he got a message from all the people, all the aid workers for his humanitarian organisation saying, we've all gone underground. They've just struck near the aid centre. Now, that aid centre is nowhere near any military. I mean, I can tell you, I've been there. It is some little suburb out on the outskirts of Kramatorsk. It's nowhere near any military strategic target, and they hit near there. And they appear to be starting to do to Kramatorsk what they've done to Avdiivka and what they've done to Bakhmut and other places. It's a slow, grinding destruction of a town. And we must remember that these are civilians. These are people's lives that are being destroyed on a daily basis. So when I talk about, Kramatorsk was hit, I've got experience of people I have met, people I know, cowering in shelters because those strikes have hit near their humanitarian aid centre or where they live. Not the aid centre, but and they're thinking they are there like teaching groups of 12 kids. They can't have any more because there are no schools operating along the front line because you're not allowed to group that many people together because it's too risky. You have a class of 30 kids, or you have a school that's got 400 kids, and some missiles hit that school. That's goodbye 400 kids. And so there are rules about how many people can group together. And so these guys have a place called Terracon where they do wonderful work with children who have nothing else, or need some creative outlet for the trauma that they're suffering. And you're thinking these humanitarian workers are putting the effort in off their own back to help these kids in Kramatorsk, and then they're unable to do that because they're carrying in a base room because these bastards are just striking Kramatorsk. There's they're very real human ramifications, obviously, to what Russia do routinely, and it's worth reminding viewers about that these are real people underneath this rubble. Obviously, they are, but it's just continual, and it's been 2 years of the Russians doing this, and we become desensitized, and it becomes normalized, and it shouldn't, and we should still be shouting about this in media outlets around the world, but instead you've got dickheads like Tucker Carlson prancing about Moscow, saying how wonderful Moscow is. Oh, look, it's so quiet on the streets. Yeah, that's because they've all been mobilized and conscripted and sent to their deaths by Putin. That's why it's quiet. Oh, there's no crime here. Yeah, because all the prisons have been completely cleared out and people sent to their deaths. So where you've got these absolute idiots like Tucker Carlson presenting false narratives about the reality of this war, and when you've got Republican senators and representatives feeding on that sense of that false narrative, you've got missiles hitting Kramatorsk and Sloviansk. The attack killed a woman in her late 40s and a 23-year-old man. Other victims are believed to be trapped under the rubble of destroyed buildings. Why does Tucker Carlson not talk about that? Why does he not talk about 2 years of indiscriminate attacks on Ukrainian society? That kind of cherry picking infuriates me. By goodness, I'd love to meet that man in a dark alley, and he would not. I mean, like I say, I'm not the most physical guy generally. Like I can barely walk at times, but mind over matter, I would do that man in. A Ukraine drone has been destroyed over Voronezh region, according to Russia. However, the governor's statement is a little different to usual. The consequences on the ground are being clarified. No citizens were injured. The operational situation is under control. The Ukrainians are trying to hit the Russian targets within Russia. Now, going on to the destruction of the Novichokazk landing ship on the 26th of December, if you remember, it was moored at a jetty in Feodosia in southern Crimea. And more details have emerged about the destruction of the ship. According to a local report, local air defense system was inoperative and could not intercept the two incoming Storm Shadow missiles. The Novichokazk was reportedly under repair in Feodosia from the 17th of November. She was due to undergo sea trials on the 26th and was being manned by a crew of up to 90 personnel who were seconded from 3 other large landing ships, the Yamal, the Azov, and the Nikolai Filchenkov. Most of the personnel were professional contracted sailors, with 14 conscripts also present. Many were reportedly sleeping in cabins at the time of the attack, with the commanders on the navigation bridge. Almost all of those who were sleeping are said to have been killed. The ship was hit by 2 missiles that which struck the bow and stern, causing the immediate deaths of dozens of the crew from the initial explosions and fragmentation. The entire ship exploded catastrophically 10 minutes later, but it seems that many of the crew escaped in time. The incoming Storm Shadows are reported to have been detected, but the local air defense system had broken down a day before the attack and was inoperative. According to the Ukrainian resistance group Atesh, Russian air defense commanders are being punished for the lapse. Officially, 4 of the crew had died, 3 whose bodies were found in the wreckage and 1 who died in hospital, and 34 are missing, including 4 conscripts. Given the explosion sent pieces of the ship flying over 600 meters, it seems unlikely they will ever be found. A useful addition of information there to what happened. And then War Translated posts something from United 24 here. A Ukrainian soldier finds evidence of war crimes on a camera stolen by Russian invaders. The camera contains photos of a family from a Ukrainian village that was occupied by Russians for a month, as well as photos of Russian soldiers themselves and evidence of their war crimes. One video shows a line of civilians, including children, being led away with their hands and eyes tied. Again, there you go. More to add to the banks and banks of evidence of Russian war crimes. Joe Biden blames the fall of Avdiivka on congressional inaction. Quote, this morning, Ukraine's military was forced to withdraw from Avdiivka and after Ukrainian soldiers had to ration ammunition due to dwindling supplies as a result of congressional inaction, resulting in Russia's first notable gains in months. A readout from his call with Zelensky reads, Biden called upon Congress, which has gone into recess, to urgently pass a bill authorizing aid to Ukraine that had been stalled for months. Biden admitted that the Ukrainians may lose other cities after Avdiivka until the US Congress approves additional aid funding for Ukraine. No, I'm not sure, he says. Nobody can be sure. Look, the Ukrainians are fighting bravely and heroically. There is so much at stake. The idea that we're running out of ammunition, that we're going to turn our backs, I find absurd, unethical. So I will fight to get them the ammunition they need, said the president of the US. Now, moving on to other news, Navalny, as we know, died. Some interesting things about his death that don't quite add up. So lots of people saying, well, it's obviously Putin's killed him. And lots of people saying it makes no sense for Putin to kill him. This is actually a bad time for him to have been killed. So it's the Americans or something. Anyway, 2 days before Navalny was pronounced dead, several officers from the FSB, the Russian intelligence service, are said to have paid a visit and proceeded to disconnect and dismantle some of the security cameras and listening devices there. And that's according to The Times, which is a reputable source in the UK. Right. You also, and I can't find the source for this now, but I did read something yesterday that said, interestingly, the Russians claimed or reported Navalny had died officially 2 minutes after his official time of death. In other words, it looked very much like they knew it was going to happen. They had things prepared. He died, and then they put it out there. But at the official time of his death and the official release of the report is highly suspicious. But I can no longer find the source for that. So, take that with a pinch of salt. There's a lot of dodginess revolving around the death of Navalny, as you can well imagine. Now, here we have, I won't continue playing this, but a grenade launcher goes off at the back of this kids' judo hall, or whatever they're doing, wrestling, I think. A grenade launcher exploded at a school in occupied Melitopol. According to Kremlin media, one of the spectators brought a hand grenade launcher to a children's judo competition and accidentally fired it. What are you doing? 6 people were lightly injured. Just nuts. Goes off in the back of the hall there. Everyone runs out. I mean, luckily there weren't any deaths involved there, but just insane. And then, this is what freedom in Russia looks like. In Tula, police beat up participants of the Amore party dedicated to love, openness and sexuality. So there is no such thing as love, openness and sexuality in dictatorial Russia. You cannot express your own sexuality with fear of being arrested. So SOBR fighters burst into the Typografia Cultural Centre in Tula, laid people face down on the floor, beat them up, and you can see people getting beaten up here. The party participants were threatened with being sent to war in Ukraine, forced to squat and sing the Tula anthem. The masked men called themselves participants of the war, and among the attackers were employees of the Centre for Combating Extremism. Then the young people were taken to the police, where some of them were charged with LGBT propaganda and then released. It's illegal to do anything involving any form of sexuality that isn't heterosexual, normative heterosexuality. So, yeah, this is what freedom looks like. This is what liberty is. This is what personal sexual expression looks like. And it just goes to ridiculous levels. So this is what freedom looks like in Russia. In Moscow, FSB security officers disrupted a Me Amore Fest organised by fans of the My Little Pony cartoon series. The event was cancelled under the pretext of spreading LGBT propaganda, even repainting the rainbow pony on a poster in the colours of the Russian flag did not help. So that would normally be rainbow colours, and they repainted it in Russian flag. Still got stopped. Just what are you like? Yeah, that's Russia for you at the moment. Anyway, thanks for watching. Please like, subscribe and share. Really appreciate your support. Take care. I'll speak to you soon.